All right. I am Tamika Reed. This is Women in Linux meetup for January the 9th. We, as a group, kind of got started with this. For a little background about me, doing Linux administration now, going on some umpteen years. I'm just playing 19 years. Don't want to seem like I'm dating myself, but I just did. And kind of got started because I wanted to show my friend like some really cool things that I'm doing in Linux, and I think she would be good fit because she's very detail oriented. She's slowly making the transition on over to the dark side. Linda, she's coming with us soon. But I started because I wanted to. She wanted to learn, and then I also saw a big push for more people to get into tech, but nobody ever talked about infrastructure and automation and SAN storage and networking. It was always, you need to go code. And I'm like, well, where do you think your code lives? Let's start there. So we started the nonprofit based on that. And so what you've gotten over the past couple of years has been, uh, I think, an amazing journey from where we started sitting on the sofa around New Year's talking about it to now, where I've been able to, do two keynotes at a conference. I sit on a couple of program committees. I've been able to help people find jobs. I've been able to push uh, people, employers to people, and vice versa. So I think the journey has been amazing. I think 2018 has nothing but has no doors. So just imagine 2018 for women in Linux with a Lamborghini with no doors, or Jeep with no doors, however, whatever your favorite car is, but there are no blockers. The only blocker that I see for 2018 for us is what you want. Like if you don't show up, we can't present it to you, right? So this is exactly what we want to do. We have seen a lot of people really wanting to commit to women in Linux in so many ways that I can't keep up with everything that everyone wants to do. So we get it in where we can, and go from there. I'll let D take over, and then after that, we'll roll into what's on the agenda for tonight. D, we can't hear you, and it says your mic is on. Well, we can't hear you. I'll continue until you get your mic going, and you can hop in later. All right. So that's enough about me. I'm gonna give you all is
Can
these
you hear me now?
yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, so none of my headsets are working, but thank you guys all for coming out. I'm D Parlor. I'll always be manning the chat. So usually I'm super silent, but thank you guys for coming out. I'm excited about 2019. Um, we have an agenda which Tam worked really, really hard on. Um, again, thank you for coming out.
All right, so I'm gonna turn this over to everyone. We're just gonna go in ABC order. If you could just tell us who you are, where you're currently at, and how'd you find us, and any other information you want to give us. You want to kind of keep it brief to a hot 30 seconds to a minute, and then we're just gonna go through real quick. Chandra, you're first up. No,
Hello.
Chandra. Oh, there you are.
Hi. I am in Atlanta, Georgia. Currently working in network engineering, and I've used Linux a little bit, but I'm trying to further my knowledge. And I'm not really sure how I found this group. I think I was just doing some searches on careers, and I ran across it somewhere.
That's awesome. Well, you got, you're in the right spot tonight because I got something for you. Chris,
Okay.
Chris, you're up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris. I'm based out of DC. I heard of you guys doing a Google search on minority organizations. I think when I first saw you guys were just starting up. I remember us emailing back and forth with one of your group members, and it's been great.
Awesome. D, we'll skip over you. Linda, you're up.
Hey, I'm Linda. I'm located in the DMV area. I'm a cybersecurity engineer. I found Women in Linux after listening to a podcast that Tamika did with Greg over on Blacks in Technology. And I went to the website after listening to that podcast and made contact with the organization then. And I really um, what I like about Women in Linux is the opportunity you have to get some hands-on experience with a lot of different tools out there. And you really need to stick with this organization because you're going to learn a lot of stuff. And at work, your coworker's going to be looking at you like, how do you know that? Like, what? We don't even use that here. Where'd you learn that?
Exactly.
So, exactly.
All the time, all the time. That's a true testament in my own experience. I'm not
Yep.
gonna even lie to you on that one.
Yep.
All right, thank you, Linda. Lucy, you're up.
Hi, I'm Lucy. I live in Herndon, Virginia. I'm a system engineer working in enterprise applications with the government. I'm also trained to be a cybersecurity analyst with the Air Force Reserve. I heard of Women in Linux. I used to work with Tamika, and she opened up my eyes to how vast IT is as far as different areas, infrastructure storage and all that, and how Linux is pretty much everywhere. In addition to that, my experience with the cybersecurity realm, we are using a lot of Linux, specifically Kali distribution. So I would love to just kind of learn a little bit more and get more proficient at that.
Awesome. Thank you, Reggie. You're on.
Hey, what's going on? This is Reggie. I'm here in the Houston area, and I am a cloud infrastructure engineer. I found out about this group through Tamika. Just talking to her in the Blacks in Technology Slack, and I try to come out and support as much as I possibly can.
And we thank you for that. I, I know I pop a lot in Blacks in Technology, but you get the point though.
Yep.
You get the point and you get where I'm going with it. Thank you, Reggie. All right.
Absolutely.
All right. So all right. So topics this year. All right. So I'm getting ready to show you something. And again, like I said, I don't want you to walk away with like, oh my God, this is overwhelming. When are we going to how are we gonna get through this? This is not the group for me. No, 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 no. This is the group for you. Okay. So I'm gonna show you this, but I want you to be excited as well too. All right. So let's go over here to my mind map for that I've been working on. Let me shrink it down. All right. This is what we're covering tonight. I know looks crazy, sounds crazy, looks like something you're like, oh my God, who has time for this? You do. You got time for this. You got all the time in the world under objectives, tech conferences, exams, some rising fundamentals that are on the rise, things that we want to cover for the year, automation, and then some programming stuff. And this is just like one of the mind maps that I have. So bear with me tonight as I go through this and I talk about stuff. So let's get started on this. And I see some chatter, but yeah, it doesn't fit the screen. Yeah. So let's just go up here. All right. Boom and boom. Let's start off with tech conferences. And these links and stuff, some of these links for the tech conferences were sent out in the newsletter. If you have not signed up to our newsletter, D, can you please post the link to the newsletter? And also, if you have not signed up for our Slack group, you need to sign up for our Slack group, because I post a lot of stuff in the Slack group. So, you know, hey, if you're not sure about what's going on or where stuff is at or what we're doing, sign up there. KubeCon. We just came back from KubeCon in Seattle this year or last year for 2018. It was we went for 6 days because training starts on Monday, and then you got to get there early and do those things. But KubeCon was great. I enjoyed KubeCon because of a couple of things. One, it was informative, and I got a chance to talk about just a lot of different topics. And when you hear people say Kubernetes or uh, containers or observability, and you feel like they're talking over your head, no, I got the witness where people just don't know, right? So that's what's really cool about the conference. It was 8,000 people. And out of those 8,000 people, I'd say a very small percentage of those people actually have implemented Kubernetes, have done it in production, have understood the ground basis of it, and so forth. So take a look at it. I'll post the links and stuff in Slack on Kubernetes and go from there. HashiConf. All right, so HashiConf is coming up. I've been looking for this link and I couldn't find it. But it is coming up, and I think it's in September. I was told it was in March, but I got another link. Somebody had sent me, and I think it's in September. So with HashiConf, this is where you start getting into your tools such as Nomad, Packer, Console, Service Mesh with Console Connect, and Terraform. And we're big on I'm big on being agnostic as possible, because we're in the era, if you look at it, and if you've been paying attention in tech, we're in the era of being hybrid and multi-cloud. And so being able to go in between a OpenShift cluster, a OpenStack cluster, an AWS cluster, a Google Cloud, or a Amazon, any of those, GCP, any of those, you can't use one tool inside of, say, CloudFormation for Amazon and then expect it to work over in Azure. It just doesn't translate. So HashiCorp gives you that ability to do that, and the conference is pretty good conference, and they're pretty cool set of people. OzCon. There's the CFP out for OzCon. There should be a CFP out for HashiConf as well too. OzCon was one of my first talks that I got accepted and was able to present. That actual talk is actually out on it's out there on YouTube as well too. And check it out. Let me know. But if you have a talk that you want to do, let me tell you something about this group. Nobody has the right to down you or anything in this group. If you want to do a talk, you could do a talk here on our meetup. You can do just a 30-minute talk. You can do a 15-minute talk. You can present. Then that's what it's all about, because when you start getting exposure here and start going to conferences and getting exposure at conferences, it changes your trajectory of what you get exposed to and who you get exposed to. And so that's really important. The next one is Strata. It used to be called Strata Hadoop. This one is an O'Reilly conference as well, but I recommend this conference to the utmost for everybody who's doing networking, security, if you're doing blockchain, if you're doing infrastructure. When I went to the one in California, when I tell you the board for jobs was so big, and when I walked up to it just to look at a job, I had 3 recruiters standing behind me asking me, "So you looking for a job? We can hire you today. We can do interviews right now." So Strata, Hadoop, machine learning, AI, anything falling under that, and cybersecurity and blockchain and IoT, you want to be there for that one. They hold it in San Francisco and they hold it in New York. And I think they are doing one overseas as well, maybe in Europe. But again, that's a conference to be at. Scholarships. So out of all those conferences, you're like, okay, well, how in the world do I get to them? The Linux Foundation has scholarships for those. Again, I'll post these links there, and I've posted them several times, and they're in the newsletter. And I'm also going to make this mind map public as well. The CNCF has scholarships, and O'Reilly has scholarships. And when I say scholarships, yeah, you do have to fill something out. Yeah, you do have to write an essay of 800 words saying why you want to go to the conference, and if you haven't been to the conference, and if you need help with that, we can help you with that as well too. So get on that. There's also Afrotech and GopherCon coming up. These CFPs are out here as well too. And papercall.io. Well, papercall.io is not a conference, but that's where you can go find talks that are available out there for you to present, and go from there. All right. So, any questions before I continue? If you have anything. Yep, Google has a conference and scholarships as well too. Yep. It's a whole slew of them, and I just have not finished all that stuff out to put them on this mind map. All right, so let's talk about some stuff that I see that's hot right now, that I think people should be looking at. You don't necessarily have to go get the certification for, but you can at least sign up for it, and study the classes. Let's just go from top to bottom. Kubernetes, Jenkins, TOGAF, blockchain, security, OpenShift. And really OpenShift and Kubernetes should fall under multi-cloud, hybrid cloud is really what that should have fell under, from thinking about it. But even if I didn't do that, those things are hot right now. Um, Learning Kubernetes, the foundational stuff you can learn over at Linux Foundation. These are links that I have out on these things. That's just Kubernetes itself, and then the Linux Academy has them too. And here's like the Kubernetes fundamentals. Here, I think with an extra $100 or something like that, you can get the exam included with this, so it comes out to $300. We also have Jenkins. There's a Jenkins certification. There's a class on Udemy, and there's a class on Linux Academy that you can go get certified in Jenkins as well. Huge. You can always get that as well too. In terms of TOGAF, uh, TOGAF is a certification when we're talking about enterprise architecture. So I put down here to show you like what people are talking about when it comes down to what a solution engineer does, and it falls under TOGAF as well too. But when you start talking about enterprise architect, technical architect versus solution architect, everyone that I heard tonight, you fall into one of these areas. Even if you're doing security as well, you fall into one of these areas. um, don't be, like I said, don't be alarmed about this information. I'm going to make all this stuff public so you can go through this and get the links and start, churning away at it. The other one is blockchain. All right. So when we talk about blockchain, and this is one of Linda's specialties, we're talking about something that kind of covers everything from networking to security to infrastructure, with and then Kubernetes and OpenShift. I mean, it's vast. So even if you just started learning going down the path of blockchain, you'll get there. So someone said we got a question. Security Plus. One second, I'm need some water. Hold on. Sorry, I needed some water. Security Plus is cool. But here's where I stand with security, and I'm always gonna say this, and I know people are probably gonna drag me in the mud for it. Security Plus is cool. CISSP is cool, but I think you need to add some technical skills to that, whether it's you add some, some basic Linux commands and how to move around, and how to harden a system and do compliance. Whether CISSP or the CASSP, or if you are taking that and going to learn AWS. Security is good from a compliance standpoint. What I've seen is a lot of organizations are like, okay, cool, you understand what we need, but how do we do it? So if you walk into a situation, and it's just, I mean, to me, it's just common sense to me. If you walk into a situation where you got security and you know how to fix the problem, you're winning. But if you walk into a situation where they got to choose between you got security and you really don't know how to apply, you just understand the compliance that you need to meet, you may still get hired, no doubt, but your bargaining chip won't be as great if you understand what I mean. That's just my personal take. So I say I mean, if you're working in government, yeah, you just got to have the security plus. That's just what it is. It's just something that just what it is. However, if you go get the CISSP, it trumps the security plus. So you don't even need to worry with it, right? And I think there's another one from CompTIA that's one above. I think that is the CASP, I think it is. But again, understanding the technical aspect and then how to apply the compliance of with that is huge. Even with blockchain, understanding blockchain and the compliance that you need to meet, having the technical part of it and having those two marry each other, I'm telling you, you're golden. In terms of OpenShift is the new hotness right now. People can't get enough of it. People can't. Organizations are hiring left and right on this. They're looking for like it's to the point now where they're like, do you understand basic foundation of CI/CD? Do you understand GitLab? And do you understand Kubernetes? Basically, what I was told was, can you learn? Do you know how to learn? Oh, okay. Well, come on in. We're going to send you to a 4-week boot camp. And after we get done with you with that boot camp, you go off and you'll be certified and then go off about your way. That's how hot it is. Like, can you learn? Do you understand the basics? And that was what I was told. So I understand the basics, and yes, I can learn. And you can go right over to Linux Academy and take it, or you can spin up uh, a mini cube and learn Kubernetes, because underneath OpenShift is Kubernetes. OpenShift is the pretty interface to Kubernetes. Kubernetes is, you can learn Kubernetes the hard way from Kelsey Hightower, or you can sit down and say, okay, I'm just going to install Minikube and I'm going to go through a tutorial. And you can also go here, uh, Kata Containers. I think he has an academy right there, comes right up with talking about Kubernetes and how to get started with that. And then there is, like I said, Kubernetes the hard way, comes right up. Kelsey Hightower, Linux Academy took it and rebranded it. The Linux Foundation has one. Udemy has one. edX.org has a fundamental one. Everybody has a fundamental one. And again, all these links that I'm talking about, this stuff is posted already in our Slack group, and some of this is not, but for the most part, it is. All right, so free training. Um, Earlier this week, or last week I should say, Azure came out with a email for you to go get free training. I posted that link in our Slack group as well too. Um, I'll send that out. I'll put a link in here. I'll send that out. AWS has free training. That link is here. And then there's free training with Puppet as well. They have a learning VM. You can go take that, download it, start playing with it. Puppet 5, I believe, is the latest and greatest understanding Puppet. And then you have to do some evaluation for yourself on this. When I say this, I'm talking about what tools should you learn? Should you learn Puppet? Should you learn Ansible? Should you learn Salt? Or should you learn Chef? This is all uh, project and company dependent. Places like Capital One, Salt Chef. If you're looking at a Walmart, Puppet. If you are looking at a place like Amazon, they'll tell you they make they make their own tools. They don't even use those. So they're big on what Python, Ruby, Go, pick a coding language. That's what they're big on. If you are looking at somebody like uh, uh, a hedge fund, yeah, you probably want to do an assault or a chef in terms of that. Getting down into to those things. I think um, Puppet Salt Chef, and Ansible are just what I call basic tools to have in your toolbox. Like it's to the point now where if you know Linux, you just should know Ansible, or you should just know some other tool. That's it's to me, it's just what I've seen. It's just that simple. Let me check, see if we got any questions. I'm gonna open up the floor. Anybody got any questions or anything I said or object to anything I said? It's cool. Yep. Yes, yes. The Pluralsight uh one is when you sign up for it is up to 2025. So it's free. You get a chance to get the certification. You can get some free Azure credits as well too. I think you get up to like 300 Azure credits, and Azure is like the new hotness as well too. Not only because they bought GitHub, but because a lot of people are not just saying, you know what, I don't want all my stuff in Amazon. I want some of my stuff over here in Azure. And I think, Reggie, I even think you had a situation where you were moving from Google Cloud to Azure or AWS and back and forth. Now you know, if you're going between 2 and 3 different clouds, and you may have something on prem, there's no way in the world you can have something from Azure that you have like a tool that's going to work over in AWS, and that's where that HashiConf comes in and being cloud agnostic. So I'm telling you, 2018 is wide open. Salaries are ridiculous right now. You have no idea. All right.
Hey, Tamika.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Reggie. Quick question. So I know you kind of high level went over some technologies that people should get familiar with. My
Mm-hmm.
question is, for people who are just maybe like kind of exploring these technologies,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to learning, how deep should they go? Should they do just enough to be dangerous? Do they need to go a level deeper? Like, at what point do they need to know, like, hey, I've learned enough to go apply for an XYZ job?
A good question, because you know what? That is all covered over here. I have that on the mind. No need to worry. I'm gonna get to that.
Cool.
So write that question in the chat, and I'm gonna go back over it. All right. So we got that one question. I'm gonna go back to it, but this right here is what I see. Right here is what I call fundamentals on the rise. All right. Why do I call them on the rise? Okay, so from going to KubeCon, um, I looked at a lot of the booths. I talked to a lot of people. I went to a lot of talks. And since then, I have sat down, and I think they had like 360 talks that they posted on YouTube. I've at least gone through at least 50 of those talks just to get an idea of like what people are doing, who's doing what, And really, do people understand it? And what I'm here to tell you is most people don't. They just don't. It's the stuff is so new, and organizations are trying to find people that just even understand this stuff. Now it's the time to just learn it. So GitOps. So GitOps, one of the big ones, and I have it on here, was Chick-fil-A. Um, I was impressed with them for what they were doing. Basically, next time you walk into Chick-fil-A, you will see they have at their registers, they have three nooks. And when I say nooks, I'm talking about this nooks. Um, yep, I forget who make them off the top of my head, but they look just like this right here. Yeah, from Intel, sitting at their register, and each one of those nooks that they have at their register is running a Kubernetes cluster to get uh, stuff from about their register, the the IoT stuff that they have inside of the actual um, Chick-fil-A, the fries. They could tell you how the number of cars that came to the drive-through, the amount of time it took. All that stuff is on these Kubernetes clusters, and they have 2,000 stores, and these Kubernetes clusters are set up on all these the cluster across all these 2,000 stores. And so what they do is anytime they want to make a change, basically they check out code from GitLab, check it back in. They have different repos for every cluster that they have. So they got 2,000 repos. So now we're talking about managing 2,000 repos, but they all look the same because they all got the same hardware. There's nothing different about them. The only thing that may be different is the IP address for those clusters, and they just do GitOps. They just deploy. It does this thing with GitLab. They may throw something out in Jenkins to make sure it works. They do their security containers with the security of their containers using Aqua Security, and then just clone the repo, and everything gets spun up from there. Inside their cluster, and we'll talk about this. Just bear with me. They're using Vault for their secrets to handle those secrets. And so they have basically 2,000 Kubernetes clusters across their entire domain, which is totally cool. So again, GitOps is something new, something that people are looking to do, but then you as the networking person, you have to think about, well, what does the networking look like for that? You as the security engineer person, well, how do you secure those containers? How do you ensure that those things are, and then the physical security of that as well. So service mesh is another hotness that's been going on now when we're talking about how to have a machine or an instance come online, say a web server or a database that automatically gets registered as a service and has its traffic encrypted, um, or hey, I need to give this person, I don't want to give them a username and password to log into my server. I just want to give them a key to log in, and not a SSH key, but like a one time, an OTP key to log in. And we're starting to get into those things, and I see a lot of that as being big. Those who are doing security engineering, VMware, NSX, and Service Mesh, um, this is a good time to be into that. This is a good time to start understanding that. This is a good time for you to start looking at what VMware NSX is. There's a free class out there for it. It lasts for 60 days. There's an overview for it as well too. And then start looking at containers and service mesh and security inside of that. Huge. All right. So here you'll see I talk about observability. And I'm talking about not just monitoring, but I'm talking about I have this Kubernetes cluster, but I have these applications, right? But I have no idea where that failure is for that application. Why does it take so long for that application to respond? Um, where's the breakdown at? How long did it take to respond? And how deep dive can I go into my metrics? So this is what you're seeing here, and not a lot of people are understanding how this works. And it's really some parts of this is on the developers to implement this with their code. But what if you have an old program and you're not sure about how to get the metrics out of that program or what you need to do? Now, here's where that programming may come into play. Here's where that refactoring that application may come into play and adding something else to it so you can get those metrics. But the higher level, and this kind of goes back to a question, Reggie, what you just asked, is how deep should I go? Well, first off, I'm going to tell you, no one really understands all this stuff. So I'm going to say, first get a general idea of it, of what it is first. Then once you get an idea of what it is, each little piece can be broken down into smaller pieces. So, prime example, the three pillars of observability. I did find one that said four, but most of the stuff I've been seeing says three: metrics, tracing, and logging. Tracing meaning being able to break down like how long an application took, the time it took to respond, the time it took to go to different pages. Metrics, we're talking about what it sounds like, the metrics of getting metrics on the application, or getting metrics on routes, getting metrics on just about everything within your cluster, and also the time it takes to respond from stuff in your data center. And logging, just it's just like what it says, logging. And so what I did was I went through, there's a talk on a talk from 2017 on from Brian Lyles, and he talks about three different type of tools that you can use for getting observability. Well, one of them was Jaeger, and I took a screenshot of this to show like what Jaeger is. But don't worry about what Jaeger is. Let's worry about how to use it. So here's a YouTube clip of it. But let me see about this talk here. We start talking about an application, and these are his simple diagrams. The different things that are used inside of that application: a web server, a website, and then probably more than likely some type of logging server as well. And then he goes over to talk about some applications that help you with observability with open tracing, Prometheus, and Elk were the three that he was using for his stuff. And then he breaks down like what open tracing is in terms of the span of time it takes for something, the period of time. And then he talks about how to trace one when from the time I put in, I want to go to let's say I want to go to NFL.com, the time it takes to trace, the time it takes for that, for me to get to that site, the tracing of all the things that were used, all the applications that were used to get to that site. How do we trace that, and how do we get metrics on what's performing the best and what's not? And then when I just mentioned open tracing, and we're looking at open tracing from a framework perspective, and this is kind of like what NIST standards falls under. Looking at NIST standards, looking at open tracing as a framework, and this is what it talks about. And then I also have in here a beginner's guide for open tracing and Jaeger and Again, I'll put this all out. I'll make this all public so you all don't feel overwhelmed like you got to capture screenshots right now. Just pay attention. All right. So, more fundamentals on the rise. Platform engineering. As companies continue to grow, the need to acquire hire actually grows as well too. So acquire hire meaning, hey, I am Microsoft, I bought GitHub. Hey, I am Amazon, I bought this grocery store chain. And how do I take the tools that they're already using, excuse me, and the tools that we're already using and set up a platform so that we can have some type of commonality across all these different little smaller entities of companies, but yet not disturb what they're doing. So how do we do that? How do we set that up? And how do we go forward so that we don't have a company that we acquire her and they're using some tool from 20 years ago and we're using this new tool, but we got to keep using that tool because we can't make that leap. And how do we make that leap? So platform engineering is another one that's really coming on the scene. And not only is it coming on the scene when you're thinking about it from a job perspective, also think about it from a growth perspective. Like how much knowledge do you have to have? And so, do you need to be a specialist or do you need to be a generalist in that perspective? Serverless, new hotness, new buzzword. Uh, need to get your serverless on. I can go into a lot of details about this, but I'm not tonight because I want to sit down and actually set up serverless and do things with serverless myself so I can intelligently speak about it and grow into it. I've seen a lot of it with Kubernetes. I've seen a lot of it with AWS, and I've seen a lot of companies saying, okay, we're going to embrace that, but how does that look? And what type of training do I need to have for my people for them to embrace that? The next one is cloud native infrastructure. Um, so when we're talking about cloud native infrastructure, let's start talking about immutable infrastructure. Let's treat let's treat instances. Let's treat microservices. Let's treat VMs as if they're just cattle. I'm not gonna update it. I'm gonna roll in the new update. Um, on my VM. I'm going to roll that with Packer, and then I'm going to deploy that a new VM every single time. I'm just going to start doing canary deployments where I have my current stack up and running. That's the latest. That's the old one, and then I'm going to deploy my new stack, and then I'm going to have a load balancer up top. And once we make sure everything is tested out just right, we're going to make a cut. If it fails, we can make a cut back. Having immutable infrastructure, super huge right now. You could talk about this. I could talk about this for days. Um, but I won't. But we will this year. We're going to be hitting the pavement this year. Container security. When we talk about container security, we are talking about DevSecOps, but I prefer not to call it DevSecOps. I prefer to call it DevOps because you just should be doing security anyway, and everybody can argue that if they wanted to. So basically, inside of my environment, I go to create a container. The container is already secure. We've got it STIG. We've meet all our compliance for PCI DSS or whatever the case may be. We deploy that image, and then people build on that image. It's always constant. Well, where you start to get drift in that is if you have someone, again, acquire hire, that's coming in and they make their own containers and it may not be in the way that you do it, or it may be a little different than what you do. So you could have some drift there. One of the ones from the conference that I saw, these were the big ones: Aqua Security, Anchor, Trend Micro. NIST has their standards along with Docker and Twistlock for end-to-end container security and end-to-end encryption. Very huge. Those who are studying up on security or trying to marriage the two, when I talked about earlier for uh, dealing with having multiple tools in your toolbox, this is that avenue. Understanding container security and compliance, marry those two, setting that up for different, again, platform engineering. Pull my containers down that we've already accredited for systems. That's that big picture. Clusters across data centers. So let's step back. Let's say I have a Kubernetes cluster in AWS. I also have one in my private cloud, and I just did an acquire hire, uh, and they're using Azure. How do I manage across data centers? What does that look like? Hint: service mesh, containers. All those things are great to use for this, but it's also managing those containers and managing those clusters. I think CNCF is working on a multi cloud or a multi hybrid solution, so people can have a dashboard to say, well, this is going on in my AWS cluster, this is going on in my Azure cluster, this is going on my on-prem cluster, and what does that look like? Even take it one step lower, what is the networking for that looks like? What, like, how? And this is, I go back to service mesh. What's happening is firewall rules and firewall people are starting to have to make that shift, because now you can't manage that many firewall rules. You're bound to have some failure. So how do we get out of that, and how do we fix that? So these are just ideas and topics that people are exploring right now. So VMware, NSS service mesh in general, container security, observability, tracing, logging, metrics, understanding those things is huge. And then what do we manage to cluster with? Um, Kubernetes and Nomad are two big hotness right now. Kubernetes being their own thing, but then you had VMware just bought Helptio, and what does that look like? And how does that fit into service mesh? And Istio, how does that fit into service mesh? These are things that people are exploring, uh, trying to get a good handle on, but now's the time to learn it. And now's the time to put that on your resume, just even if you just go download the tool and play with it and set up your own little cluster, and say you get an app from somebody's GitHub and deployed it to your Kubernetes cluster and start working with security and understanding Envoy and Istio. And these things are free to learn. They're open source, so you don't have to pay to learn them. You're free to learn. But if you want to be in somebody's environment, in a learning environment where they're training you, of course, yeah, you pay for it, but you don't have to. SRE. SRE is still huge, but you will see some of this as an overlap for understanding applications and what happened, and writing tools to fix your applications. Well, give or take there. But the books I recommend are SRE from Google, I think, and I'll post all this stuff. The SRE workbook, Becoming SRE, and then I pointed to some jobs. I mentioned Istio and Zero Trust Networks. Zero Trust Networks. There's a great tutorial out there. I think the it's a YouTube tutorial, and I have it, and I'll post that too. Is from South Path, and he talks about zero trust networks. And he goes through a very detail from being single to double to being zero trust, meaning instead of having segmentation with your networks, you have micro segmentation, where now you're just limited to just logging in or having access. Say a intruder just has access to an instance, but because we have zero trust and we do microsegmentation, they can't break out of that instance. They're stuck in that instance. So the zero trust networks is another big one, another huge one that's coming up. And I also talk about VMware NSX, um, understanding uh, what layer this works at, how sidecar proxy with Envoy works at. Don't worry about it if you don't know it. It's okay. Like I say, stuff is on the rise. Understanding the difference between the control plane and the data plane and where that falls and how traffic flows, and understanding how your application works and flows throughout your cluster and flows throughout the internet. That's important. And also if it's actually working. All right, so distributed systems, I have to add to this. Uh, Another bit hot in this Kubernetes, I mentioned that before. Chaos engineering. All right, so anybody heard of the Simian Army or Chaos Monkey from Netflix, or self-healing clusters? We're at that point now, and I think this is where security comes into play as well too, and as well as understanding uh, um, resilient networks. Where with Chaos Monkey, hey, I'm just gonna throw a monkey wrench out there, and if your machine dies, the application shouldn't stop working. And we're gonna see if you have it highly available. We're gonna see if you have, if you're doing what you say that you're actually gonna do, and we're doing it in production. And so these concepts, these things are new and on the horizon. I just want to make sure you know that this is out there and maybe something that you're interested in. But for this year, this is going to be part of our focus. Uh, Linux is just the underlining foundation of what you need to know. And then, like I've always said before, uh, you can look at DevOps and say there are verticals outside of what a sysadmin used to do. Backups, uh, high availability, vMotion, all those things. If you were a Linux administrator and you were in a small company, you did every single thing. And everything has kind of been siloed off. But what I see happening, and this is a lot of things that a lot of people come to me and ask me about, is a lot of people are just learning what AWS is, but they have no clue about routing. They have no clue about networking. They have no clue about how DNS works. They have never ever touched a physical machine, and people are looking for those people because guess what? They still need them in their data centers. They still need to understand those fundamentals. And so I want to give you here these fundamentals, and I'm going to give you these high level concepts. And then it's on you to pick and choose where you feel like you want to go. But I just want you to be aware of them. So, any questions? I'm going to break for a hot 30 seconds and we're going to hop back into it.
Hey, I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I always got a question, but so I know you're going over a lot of fundamentals. So what are some things that maybe you do to not get overwhelmed by all of this content? Like, do you kind of like just pick a technology and lock in on it until you get comfortable with it and then move on to the next? Like, what do you do?
So, for me, what I do is I sit back and I look at what an organization that I'm working with needs. And then I look at what other organizations are doing. And I say, okay, I may take a little piece of that and a little piece of this, and then I'll go learn that heavily. And I'll try to get a good understanding of how it flows. And then I take that back to the organization that I'm working with. And I was like, okay, look, we can do these things, but it's going to require you to do this. How can we help you get there? And is this something that you want to go down? So for me, all this stuff that you just see, I actually read all this stuff. That's just who I am. Not everybody can do that. But I understand and pick and choose how deep I want to go with each one. I can tell you right now what interests me the most is this service mesh, zero trust networks, and observability. Container security interests me as well. but I just, again, I lump that under DevOps for myself, so it doesn't stand out to me like that. So looking at those things as people move towards uh, having a hybrid cloud. That's why Amazon introduced AWS Outpost, because Azure they got the Azure Stack where you can be on-prem and not have to move to the cloud. Well, Amazon said, okay, well, we need to be on-prem too. So there's two models that falls under out of AWS Outpost. You can buy it directly out of the box and treat it just like it is for AWS, or you can customize it. Well, what did you just do? What did Amazon just do? All those people that have VMware and they want to move to the cloud, they can now pretty much take their stuff off of the hardware that they've been running on. And guess what? I got 5 data centers. I can standardize across that, and I can still get the same benefits of Amazon. I can forklift that because I can export my VM. I can import my VM. I can export it back out if I needed to. Put it in AWS, treat it and refactor it. Now I have a common set of tools that everyone can use. They can go get trained on those things. We already meet compliance because we got FIPS compliance, we got SOX, we got everything. They're already compliant. They're already delivering compliance to me. The only thing I got to do is maintain it. And even then, I don't really have to maintain it because they're going to maintain their stuff, which means they got to push down to my stuff. So that compliance piece kind of becomes seamless. Same way with the Azure Stack. So when I look at stuff, how I look at it is I don't look at tools to solve one problem. I look at the organization as a whole and step back and do a 30,000-foot view. And then I drill down and I'm like, okay, this piece, they could use this piece and they can use this piece. And then just give an overall view of that. And that's what a lot of people are looking for. A lot of people are looking for people that can sit there and look at a 30,000-foot view of what an organization needs. And then with that knowledge, take it and say, okay, you need to do X, Y, and Z to get here. But how do you do that? How do you as a person know to do that? Guess what? You don't. You're going to have to go and ask questions. You're going to have to read. You're going to have to look at some YouTubes. You're going to have to look at what people are doing. You're going to have to ask questions. When I was at the conference, I ran into Deepak from Puppet, and we were talking about these tools and what people know and how people know these things. And one of the things he said, and we both agree on this, and it's something I say all the time. He's like, when you're sitting in the seat as a CTO and you're technical and you look across the board and there's no other technical CTOs, who do you turn to? Where do you get your information from? Some of it is from trial and error. Some of it is from people who may have done it, but 9 times out of 10, you got to go learn it. And that's the cool thing about tech. You got to go learn it, but you got to understand what that organization needs and read up on it. And I'm a YouTube Audible fan. I am not good with sitting down, flipping out a book sometimes. I do it, but I'm a YouTube fan and I may read online. But I like physical books, but sometimes it's a snooze. It's a snooze fest and I'm going to fall asleep. I'm not going to even lie. But
Tamika,
that's what I do.
that's what's great about being in the solution space. One of the things I really like is it's an opportunity to always be learning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the expectation that you skill up depending on what project you're working on. So the expectation is that you would go out and discover and learn. So anybody, that's interested in living that type of life, you should check out the solution space.
Yep. Solutions, architects, any type of enterprise stuff. It's always a constant churn, always a constant learn. And you're not going to know every single thing, but I'm one of those people. If you mention something to me, oh, I'm going to go read about it. I'm going to go read about it, break it down, decipher it, and you see how big this mind map is. So you can imagine I probably mind mapped it out. All right. So let's go over here. Automation. Uh, for me, in my space, Go. I should have added Ruby, but Go, Python, and Ruby are the ones that I always see. Are always the hotness that I always see. Um, you could pick one of those three and run with it. If you're dealing with HashiCorp products, you're probably dealing with Go. Uh, if you want to deal with something on Ansible, that's Python. If you're dealing with Ruby, Chef, they all play on each other. Pick one, learn one, keep it pushing. Um, Automation, like I said before, Ansible, Puppet, Chef, Salt. HashiCorp, Nomad, Console, Vault, Packer. Very important here. If you got these tools right here, and then pick one of these and pick that, you're good to go. Endless jobs, throw in Docker, boom, yeah, whatever. All right. So here, I know it sounds like a lot, but these are topics that I want to cover for the year. In no various order. I haven't decided on which order it's going to be, but GitOps, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, blockchain, compliance, OpenShift, should have thrown that under multi-cloud, security, cluster scanning, VM scanning, chaos engineering, observability, serverless. Again, we're going to do some programming classes. We got some programming classes coming up. Resume building, resume interviewing. I should add on to here, not just resume building, but I also should add uh, blogs. I also should add podcasts, and I also should add training. Are all great resume builders. Um, and mock interviews. And of course, we'll do some interviews, creating wealth, and I just threw Docker in there because not everybody understand those concepts. But underneath all of this, everything that you see here for topics covered is Linux. It's just Linux. That's all it is. Everything under here is Linux. And last but not least, how to study. Back to Reggie and your question. So how do I study? I have a Kubernetes exam that I got to take by February the 13th. So how do I study? I am a avid spin up a box at DigitalOcean, spin up a box on my local box and start playing with it, break it, fix it, ask questions, go read a book, and make my own notes. Fortunately for the Kubernetes exam, the instructor, and if we got to do a podcast with him, I need to reach out to him. He has a tooltip on how to study for the exam, and he's like, basically take every section and study it, the bulleted points, and he's like, at the end of at the end of those things, at the end of those sections, you should have at least 7 pages. He's like, that's the exam. He's like, if you know how to do those that backwards and forwards out of your notes, he's like, you'll pass the exam. It's just that simple. So what happens once you pass the exam? Can you get a job? Sure. Most people are like, hey, have you ever done this in production? Well, probably not. But what you have done is you understand containers, you understand how to write YAML files, you understand clustering, you understand how to trace an application. You know why? Because you came to Women in Linux, and that's what we're going to show you. But all that stuff that we're talking about doing, it's going to take time. You're not going to leave here tonight and go study observability and then be ready to go get a job with it tomorrow. No, it's not going to happen unless you ahead of it, unless you understand it already. But what you can do is you can study tonight, and maybe in 2 weeks spin up and actually understand a general concept of it because you read articles and You were able to download Zipkin or Jaeger and just make an application and deploy it, and then understand just the basics of it enough for you to go into an organization and being able to talk and understand definitions and understand how things apply. That's really important. The high level stuff is really important to understand, and then you dig deep down into that once you get more into playing with it. But you just need to understand the high level stuff first. And that's how I study. So, any questions? No? Everybody understand everything?
Hey, Tamika, I typed in the chat. I had a question about Vagrant. Is that
Okay.
used much anymore for
Yeah,
automation?
yeah, it is. Well, it's used much if you're on your local box and you want to test and deploy stuff. So a lot of people still use Vagrant.
Okay.
Let me see. Yep, we talked about salary negotiation last year. There's out on our YouTube. If you have not been to our YouTube channel, I advise you to go to our YouTube channel. A lot of stuff is already out there that we talked about. I do want to talk about it, and then I don't want to talk about it because I've talked about it for 3 years. But I guess I can still talk about it. But I really don't want to talk about it. But I can though. I'm conflicted on that. When it comes down to salary negotiations, is one thing. What I think a lot of people miss value on is not getting the interview, but in the interview. Uh, a lot of feedback that I've gotten uh, in my own interviews is I could talk to you for hours about a topic. And why can't you talk to me for hours about a topic? Because I actually read and I actually sit down and I study it and I sit down like and look at a talk on what somebody did on YouTube. And what I tend to do is I'll take somebody's talk and I'll mind map it out. So this is the one I did for um when I went to KubeCon, and I was in the talk for Chick-fil-A and GitOps. So I listened to his talk. I was like, okay, what solutions did he come up with? He did Vault, and they didn't do dynamic secrets. They need to, but they're doing static secrets. One Git repo per restaurant, operations by pull requests, cloud native, SRE best practices. What is GitOps to them? How does that work? How does the system flow? The problems that they had. They wanted to be self healing. Again, cloud native infrastructures. What are we talking here? How to automate upgrades of the cluster. We throw away. We don't treat them as pets. They're cattle. Um, Clusters at each location. How many did he have? Does he have a deployment team? IoT of devices. What devices does he have? These are the things that I'm sitting in a talk and I'll 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 mind map it out. But now I understand how he's doing GitOps. So now I can go back and say, well, I can break this stuff down even further and go and find out what I need to know about these things. And so if somebody wants to come to me and talk about GitOps, well, I got a working example. It's already on YouTube, and then there's tons of articles out there about it. Does that make sense to people? All right, so let me pull up some stuff that I didn't pull up on here. Let's go back to the mind map. And let's pull up some of these links. All right. So let's pull up QCOM. We can look all that stuff up. We don't need to worry about that. Kubernetes. Let's go with here Jenkins. All right. So again, like I said before, Linux Foundation has this class for Jenkins. You can come here. They have a study guide, and I also think they got a step by step learn for this, or you can pay for it. So Jenkins falls into play with doing GitOps as well, and also if you're doing CI, CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous delivery. That's where that falls into play at for that. Another one that I think is huge that people are not keeping up with is there's a blockchain certification that just came out. Let me see something. Let me stop sharing real quick. Let me go to my uh, let me go to my channel, my Slack channel, and pull up some stuff for you all. All right. So what's cool about our Slack channel is we pay for it. So you can keep a note to yourself. So as you can see in mine, here's a multi-cloud strategy that I downloaded. But I think this white paper is just an awesome white paper. Let me see. And here he talks about the static data center versus the dynamic data center. They also talk about the challenges, and they show you here the private cloud that I was talking about. Like this is your traditional data center, but now people are moving into having stuff on prem and then having something in the public cloud, and then working with other data centers as well too. So, this is that view that we're talking about, and this is from HashiCorp. This falls under their stuff. And how does this look for you? Like, where are you falling at? Like, how do you network these things together? How do you figure out what data goes where? What How do you secure that data? How do you secure that traffic encryption, those containers, those VMs, whatever the case may be, that application that comes online? How do you keep up with all that stuff? And and when I say you, I'm talking to you on the phone right now. I want you all to walk away with looking at an enterprise level and an enterprise architecture standpoint, being able to step back and look at things at a 30,000-foot view and then drill down. And if you choose to drill down in security, understand security all the way through, right? Understand security in a private cloud setting, understand AWS security, understand container security. Like, those things are your focus. And you can even break that down even further and say, well, I understand container security really, really well, but I have a general idea of private cloud security and AWS security and how that should look. But I guarantee you, not everybody knows container security. They don't even know the little small piece. So you have an upper hand and you have an advantage if you start looking at things at that level. Like, it's cool to know Ansible, but it's also cool to understand how Ansible plays throughout the entire architecture. Like, can I use Terraform in Azure? Can I use Terraform and Chef? What's the benefit of doing it that way? Does it even make sense to do it that way? Should we just be using Packer to build out instances and just deploying instances and not even worry about another tool? And understand how to simplify things. Like, don't be afraid to download GitLab. Don't be afraid to download Jenkins and just play with it. Just play with it. Like, spend a weekend and play with it. Spend 4 hours on a Saturday and play with it. Spend 4 hours on a Sunday and play with it. Write your own notes. Come up with your own little thing, and then, like, okay, cool, I got it, and go from there. But taking back, stepping back, and understanding that high view is really gonna help you out. I went in here, and I got some stuff that some training that I want to do for us. I want us to start getting into time series databases and live logging, like reading stuff live that's being spit into a database, and visualizing those things and what does that mean? What does that look like for you? How do you build it? How do you do that? Just those little small nuances will get you over and get you working as well too. As you can see, I got observability in here, microservices, a business case for it. Like what? And this business case was actually pretty cool. D Zone. I recommend anybody go to D Zone. I've been on them for a while, but this is really a good one. An overall view of like what you know Chaos Monkey is. Where does it stand? How do we get faster deployments? What are the key performance indicators? They even start talking about immutable infrastructure, self-healing. These things are all just again, an overall view of these things, but at least you now have an understanding of it and how you can take that and apply it to what you're doing. And if you're working in a situation where you're bored at your job, this is a great time to get work and train up while you work. Perfect. Train up while you work. Free training. That's how you look at it. When you go to work, be like, yep, I'm excited today because guess what? I'm getting ready to do service mesh today. Psh, free training. I encourage everybody to train up while you work. But that's how I learn. That's what I go into. This is my little thing that I go back and I'm going to read these things, and start from there. And I take the approach of I have a project and we have all these moving pieces, and for me, for my sanity's sake, I take it and I mind map it out and then go from there. That's how I do it. And I take each one and I drill down into that and then write a blog about what you learn, because now you can, with some clarity, you can say, okay, I learned this, but what does it actually mean? And if you don't publish the blog, that's fine, but write about it and keep it as your little note factor so you can go back and say, okay, I learned this, and then you'll go back 3 months from now after you learn that, and you'll go back and read that. You was like, oh, this is where this was wrong. Let me change this. Let me change that, and you might publish the blog in 3 months. But it's okay. It's all right. Plus, if you got to keep up with your CISSP and your Security Plus or any type of certification, blogs count as your continuing education unit. So again, choose to write some blogs and do some videos. Yeah, you don't have to. You don't have to blog if you don't want to. That's fine. But at least you have an idea of what you did. Like you could use voice command. Like you could grab something on the phone and record yourself on like, hey, just record yourself and turn it into a blog for yourself. You don't have to publish it. It's just something that I suggest that you do just to have in your repertoire. And then two, a lot of people look for people with published works. Not to say that that's the be all if you don't have nothing published, but it sure helps with salary negotiations. Just my little tidbit of information. So any questions? I told you we was gonna get through this whole mind map. Now, and I'll stop recording now.